This conference will now be recorded.
Hello, everyone. Today is Friday, April the 24th, 2020, and we're gathered here. Maybe we're cozy. I don't know where everybody is. I feel cozy. I've made some hot spice cider, but we're here with Jennifer Foster to continue some dialogue about some wonderful videos that she had. So it was not recorded, but Dallas had some very favorable things to say, and we are expecting probably a few other people to join. But Sarah, do you want to kind of say a few words in case people haven't watched the first video? And then we can pass it to Jennifer and then just see where folks would like to take the conversation today.
Sure. So one of the things we're trying to do is provide a variety of professional development, both sort of big picture ideas around how to encourage learning and engagement for our students, and then also some really practical do now strategies. And Jennifer is a professor in the Mass Communications Department at UCO and has been teaching blended online classes for the last number of years. I think it was 10 is what I read, but Jennifer, okay, good, she's not, yes. 10 years, sort of a mixture of some face-to-face and then online. And so we are grateful for her expertise and insight into that particular skill set right now.
We want to remind everybody that these videos remain available online on our support website, instructional support, which you find at support.casady.org. And we've got a Genius Bar section and a whole page with actually 5 videos with Jennifer's introduction and then these 4 videos. So Jennifer, what thoughts do you have after our first conversation, and any kind of opening remarks that you have with folks who may or may not have been here last time?
Yeah, well, thanks, Wes and Sarah, and thank you to my friendly faces. I'm seeing some of my primary friends here that know my boys. So yeah, when we went to crisis mode and had to move to teaching all classes online, UCO did this as well, and so it really struck me how much of a shock it is when you're prepared to teach face to face or you haven't taught online and then being forced into that environment. And then on top of that, we're being forced into that environment when we're all under a personal crisis ourselves, right? We're worried about our own health, the health of our friends and family. Everything is more difficult. Just grocery shopping is more difficult. So adding on top of that, hey, recreate your entire lesson plans, your scope and sequence, the way that you were planning on doing all of these activities is very difficult. So I reached out to see if there was some support that I could provide, answer some questions. Just, I've been through the trenches. Can I help you get through it as well? Philosophy. So we met on Wednesday, had one of these Q&As, and as Sarah said, I think that the opportunity, timing wise, was a little bit better from some different divisions. But we want to continue that discussion and really drive it for things that work for you. We have some pre-sent in questions that we can talk about, but feel free to jump in and ask questions either with your mic or through the chat. And we want to make sure that we get to that it's meaningful to you and whatever it is that I could help. If there's an activity that you've always loved to do in your classroom, and maybe how I would brainstorm working that on a virtual remote access, or just anything like that I could help with.
Yeah, I think thinking about follow-ups would definitely be a good thing to do today. And maybe I'll just start, and then feel free, like Jennifer said, just grab the mic. We're a smaller group today. You mentioned something in your 4th video that I had thought about right at the beginning of this, and that was, interviews and our alumni. And, obviously this wasn't the first thing on everybody's mind as we were just like, oh my gosh, how is this going to work? But now that this is becoming more of a normal, and we're not exactly sure what it looks like in the fall, but, we're just getting more into this. Maybe this would be a good time. The idea of kids at different levels being able to connect to our alumni. I mean, I've thought about a really simple kind of prompt, like even about, hey, how do you use math and writing? How did you get to where you are in terms of your preparation? So do you want to talk a little bit about that? Because that was, anyway, something that really sparked my interest in your 4th video.
Great, yeah. Well, I think that, we have so many alumni that love Casady and are connected to what we do here that don't have the opportunity to come back and share, that couldn't come and visit the classroom on a yearly basis because they live elsewhere or their jobs just don't permit that. And one of the advantages to the situation we're in is that we might actually have more opportunity to invite them to be a part of our classroom. And I think that that would look differently depending on what grade level you teach. You know, it might be better if you set up an interview. And so you set up a GoToMeeting and you interviewed and asked them questions and recorded that and then shared that video with your students. Some age groups, it might be great if everyone was in the GoToMeeting with that person and the students were able to ask some questions. You might want to set up some guidelines depending on your groups of students, if you want them to ask questions verbally or you want them to ask questions in the chat, or if you want them to pre-submit questions. So maybe you do a Google form and have them pre-submit those questions before you even get on to the GoToMeeting, and then act as the moderator and say, okay, Sarah had this question for you. You know, Jennifer has this question, and read those questions. I think that that just depends on how much you trust your students to talk and to get it out. Caleb was on a meeting this morning and he had to share what he wanted to share, and then when it was his turn, he skipped like halfway through the story when he started to share. So he, you know, sometimes getting them to especially based off their age, start at the very beginning of the story or their thought process and go all the way through. So acting as that moderator from a, you know, a Google form or something like that, where they submit those questions, or they could submit them through Seesaw, or their parents could email it to you depending on what platform you're using. Or you know, having the, you know, the whoever you're having brought in, you know, some alumni or an expert in the field come in and share, you know, they could just talk and they could just share things. It doesn't necessarily have to be an interview where there's just a quick fire of questions. They might have some real things they want to share about what they're doing. They might have a really neat job. And I think everyone has a job where they're using things they didn't think they would use, that they had learned in school. And so, you know, I do this in my speech class where I'll bring someone who has a job that's not being a teacher or not being, you know, a speech person, and they talk about the way that they have to speak, how they're asked to present in their class, you know, or in their work environment. I brought in a real estate agent. She's like, I didn't ever expect to have to be giving speeches, but that's what I'm doing all the time, are using these speech skills. So it made it more practical and real world for our students. And especially in remote learning, I think that that's really important, that our students recognize that the work they're putting in right now is going to have a payoff for them in the future.
Well, something that we're actually going to do next week, and I'm really excited about, and that might be a tool that we could use in these kinds of guest speaker situations. We're going to have Lisa Demore, who is a national counselor and psychologist, and she has a column in the New York Times. She's written several books about, you know, dealing with stress and parenting. She's going to have 2 sessions on Monday and Tuesday night, one for just the parents of seniors, and then the Tuesday night sessions for everyone. But we're going to use a platform called GoToWebinar. It's part of the GoToMeeting family, but it's really set for more of a presentation with either one person or a panel, and then people can submit questions in advance, of course, but also during the webinar. But it's not everyone has a webcam. There's a live chat. I mean, it's different. And so maybe if people are interested in that idea, one of the things that energizes me about it, there's so many things that are great, but like it wouldn't just have to be one grade level, right? And you want to know your audience. So if we've got some, you know, pre-Kers as well as, you know, 11th graders in the room, like that's going to affect how that presenter is going to talk. But how cool would it be to invite some of our alums to talk, and then be able to open that up and say, hey, if you'd like your kids to come, you know, here's a form, they can submit questions. I think it is really important when you have a guest speaker, if we can have, you have a richer conversation, if there's more background knowledge and a little bit of information exchanged in advance. So just like this, Jennifer, we've had a chance to, you know, watch you, you know, share quite a bit, and that really helps us ask questions because we have a common base of understanding of some things that we've seen. So do you know any schools that have done that, or have we heard about anybody doing that kind of thing with alumni? Or because surely we're not the only ones thinking about this right now.
Sure. I don't know of any K through 12 right now that are using it. My connections on that are, you know, more geared towards the university level. But that GoToWebinar, we just used that at OU Law School. They were trying to figure out how to do a a competition. So they have their students compete in a moot court competition where, they're arguing against each other, and every first year law student competes in this. And they were so upset about the idea of losing out on that competition. So we used that webinar function to be able to do that. So there could be lots of people watching, but there were specific people that were the presenters. But when you were talking, it made me think of Mrs. Lopez's class, that it might be great to have something like that for a Spanish, right? To see Mrs. Lopez and someone else have conversations in Spanish. I think students would, really benefit from that opportunity to hear that interaction back and forth and how that might work with someone. I think that but Mrs. Lopez is doing a great job with her videos and her interaction. So
Very creative, very
yes,
creative.
very creative. So yeah, but it made me think that might be something fun in a foreign language class where you could see people really interact in that foreign language. So
I know our daughter Rachel.
About,
oh no, go ahead, Sarah.
sorry, I was listening to that. I wonder about it reminded me when we were talking about alumni coming in, but it reminded me of our seniors who write stories and come down to the primary. And I think they already did that before all of this, before the world went pear-shaped. But I wonder about that even, as a reaching out to just some of between our primary and upper division, or lower division and upper division faculty, and if there's an opportunity to leverage older kids getting to, like whether it's getting some of our older Spanish students to come and do it, maybe a little cultural presentation, or just involving them in some learning piece. I wonder if that's something that we could do and how that could work.
Well, and like we have those third grade buddies who come to the kindergarten classes and read to the kindergartners. And, even being able to do something like that, have the third graders who are already paired up, you could put them into the small groups or something, and let them come and read, because that would help with their fluid reading, right? And I bet a lot of students aren't reading aloud maybe as much, and that, missing some of that practice. So I think that using that to try to have that connection and that interaction, but then also that's just really great practice for the student.
I wonder if that's something we could talk to Michelle Freeland about, because she does a story hour or a story time every afternoon. I wonder if that's something that she could figure out a way to incorporate.
Well, Whitney Finley and I have gotten to help a little bit the last couple of years with the Children's Picture Book Project. And this year we were going to do a red carpet celebration in Fee Theater. We talked to Andy Dima and Courtney McQuaid to basically invite students who wanted to share their book. It was going to be an author celebration night. We could do that virtually. I hadn't made that connection before. But the thing there's, again, so many things about these kind of projects that they cross boundaries in terms of who's involved and what grades, and it connects to things that people care about, like authorship, writing, books, publishing. All of these books are digital, and the students this year, every single one recorded their voice. So in bringing, even if it is virtual, the authors who are our 12th graders together, every family, every person who comes can get an electronic copy of that book. But, what we were thinking about doing in Fee Theater was having the kids basically, come on the stage, and then there's like an author's chair, and then the student, as they have in the classroom, would read the book. But it would also be a chance, Caleb, one of our seniors last year, has had an agent, because he wrote a musical accompaniment to his book that went along, and he's been taking his book further. But we've got alumni involved in publishing, and so this is like something too that it connects to, not just this is the assignment, but hey, this is writing, this is children's book publishing. I'm fired up about that, because that was something we were gonna do, and then when all this happened, I thought, oh man, we're not, there's no way that's gonna happen. But maybe it could virtually happen for the students, and then also the kids. And we could also, because Dallas, didn't the kids, or who all's been involved with it, don't they write a story back to the seniors? I don't know if that part of it got to happen this year because of all this.
I don't know that it did this year, but usually they do. There's the kids make a book and share with the seniors make a book and come down and share. But
right, I don't think the pre-K or primary
tell you more
Yeah,
specifically.
we can find out.
Anyway.
I love I love that idea. And we could also do questions because our seniors have already shared questions. And so it would be possible to do something where like they could pre-record. There's a lovely podcast the New York Times does called The Daily. And they did a session for kids on coronavirus maybe a week and a half ago. And it was wonderful because it had the recorded voices of students all over the country asking these simple questions. And then the scientist and medical professional answered them. So I think that's exciting because I think helping, you've mentioned, Jennifer, the real world connections to skills, but that would, if we think about the questions we'd ask, what kind of questions would you all want to ask alumni, I guess? Thinking about, we've got a lot of primary teachers and we have, Hazel from lower and Heather's here from lower. What would you all ask alumni? What do you think your kids would be engaged to hear in terms of questions if we were to have some kind of alumni conference?
I think with our kids' ages, they wouldn't be able to know the difference if they were a high school senior or an alumni. To them, they're all old, good people, and so they wouldn't know or care the difference, I would think. Now, if they were coming in as a specific profession or something like that, maybe. But, how do we apply math? I mean, I think a high school kid could tell them almost the same thing as an alumni. But one thing I wanted to throw in, just back to our last topic, was it would be kind of cool if there was, on the stories, the seniors do stories, the little ones do stories, and they share. What might be cool too would be to have a collaboration where a senior and a kindergartner get together and write a book together. But anyway, that's a thought. But I'm not a kindergarten teacher, so not my
Yeah,
job.
because then they could meet, and the part that the kindergartner would struggle with about, thinking of Noah here, he would struggle with the typing, right? Like putting it into the sentences and just the individual typing of it. So if they were able to collaborate on that, then they could create that. And there's some great apps that make digital books for, there's a book creator that's very easy, plug and drop for students to create that. And Wes, I'm sure if you already had your students or know some students that did it
Yeah,
digitally, you guys already have one.
They all built into Book Creator. That's what we've
Book
used a
creator.
lot.
Okay. Well, good.
Yeah.
Then I'm on track in my recommendation. And that it's pretty easy for students to do that. But yeah, I love that idea of them being able to collaborate and have that connection, because that togetherness is important and a component that we've missed going to remote learning. But being able to make that an idea for them to be able to connect. So
Just
One of
going
the
to jump
things,
in real quick and answer your question, Wes. I wondered if maybe the kids would like to hear about what the alumni are doing for their jobs.
yes, even now, I'd like to know that, right? I heard a statistic somewhere that about a third of people can work remotely, but there's a lot of people that can't. Um, it'd be interesting to know who's involved in. I mean, we've got lots of medical professionals. I'm sure we've got all kinds of folks, at different levels close to the front lines of this. Maybe we should do that. We could do a panel. We could invite a few alumni to come and we could start there and have a panel. And that's the kind of thing that could be recorded so that if you can't do it live, your kids couldn't. But one of the things I find most energizing about our discussions on schedules is when we talk about mid-mester or things that would be in between, when we could collaborate, and work together and do something that we haven't been able to do before. And so I'm energized by that kind of thing. I think that might be really, really neat. Think about your primary kids partnering with older kids and writing a story together. Like, wouldn't that be cool? I mean, that is totally not something within the normal box of school. Carrie, do you have a thought? We're not hearing your mic, Carrie. You may try to unmute, and it says you're unmuted. You're gonna have to use sign language. Oh, we can hear you now. We got you now. Nope, that was someone else laughing. Go ahead and try. She's gonna put it in chat.
I see in the chat here, Heather's asked about Book Creator being $4.99. May we suggest it to our students to purchase? I think that there are some free, Wes, you were starting to talk. I'll let you answer that then.
Yeah, you create one, they have a free version, so you can create one free book. And then the online version has, I think, 40 books free. So as with a lot of things, we've got kids on all different kinds of platforms. So everybody's not on an iPad, but the online version of that is much more robust. And we have not actually had to pay for that in the last 3 years because of the large number of free books that it allows in the online version. So we could definitely continue that discussion, and that is a fantastic project, by the way, for anyone to do, either as a class. You can have, each student do a page, they can draw a picture, then they can have some text, and then you put that together. Maybe, and this is one of the things I was interested in, like what our follow-ups might be. Maybe we could do a follow-up session on Book Creator as a little workshop, in the next couple weeks for people interested.
Because I do think Book Creator is something we could use on all of the divisions, even our very littles, like that Mrs. Danaway has. It would probably involve a little more plug work from her, where she would, or Mrs. Gwynn or Mrs. Chaudhry, where they would receive that work from a student and then maybe be able to, put it in there and create one book for the entire classroom.
I want to give voice to Carrie's comment here.
Okay,
she
great.
said it's good also for the older students to realize that there are littles online and to be aware of the community watching, whether they're collaborating or it's just an everyday situation. That's absolutely true.
Yeah, and I talk about this, and we talked a little bit on Wednesday, but about netiquette. So netiquette is the term that was coined to talk about etiquette online, our netiquette, our net etiquette, and that the first rule of that is to remember the person, that you, even though you're not seeing people or you're not interacting with people, that there is a person behind that screen. And whatever you put out there is there forever. So your kids can be reading this, the person that interviews you can be reading this. And we've got a lot of current examples where people have been fired because of something they put out online from their job. So being able to be responsible and ethical in the way that we communicate online is an incredibly important skill. And it's definitely a real world skill because they're going to be communicating online when they go to the university or in their jobs. That would be important, and especially when we think about the different age groups that are involved in that, being able to teach that and good online etiquette, I think is important.
We might ask that as a question to everybody. What have you seen in terms of netiquette? We talk about digital citizenship, a responsible use policy, which we actually don't have for primary, but we actually need one, don't we? Because we're interacting. We're all interacting digitally. So any thoughts on what you all have seen with respect to that? Go ahead, Sarah.
I've seen things, in middle division, the kinds of things that we counsel our kids around, in terms of how we treat each other, and that, who you are online is not different than who you are in person. And trying to remind them of that. But, Jennifer was remarking on talking about, the netiquette and how that extrapolates to your college life or your career life, but thinking about it from the littles, sort of their next step lives are, as you all teach them how to be little, good little humans going on to lower division or good little humans going on to middle division. I mean, that's a vital part of that conversation as well. It's not even sort of the long range, one day you'll be a grown up and this will matter. It's next year you'll be a first grader and this matters, or next year you'll be a fifth grader and this matters. Because as all of us know, we spend a lot of time just talking to the kids about the value of their interactions in that moment alone. So, and especially now that we've all been forced online to have to deal with this, I would imagine that as primary division and lower division teachers, you are spending a lot of time thinking about how do I counsel my kids treat each other now. And I think that'll pay dividends for next year, even if we do go back to a totally normal life. Whenever that happens, I still think that will be that'll be a powerful thing that they have learned, because it's not going away.
Well, I want to segue to Jennifer's discussion about building community, because one of the rather forbidding things as we consider the future. I mean, you talked about it, Jennifer, in a video, is like kind of being in a sweet spot because we develop these relationships with our kids and now we've moved online. Nobody knows what the future is going to hold, but if we wouldn't be able to be face to face at the start of the year, it would be even more challenging and important to build community with our kids. So we've got, you know, a lot of primary and lower teachers here. You want to speak a little bit to that and kind of amplify or further elaborate on any of those tips? I know you talked about discussion forums, the cafe idea of a space where kids can come in and ask each other questions and be a little more informal. How would that look for, say, primary kids or lower kids in terms of building community beyond the live, you know, conversations that we're having over video chat or video conferencing?
Yeah, I think that this will be something that'll be challenging if we're not back on campus at the beginning of next year because, you know, you're getting a whole new group of students, maybe students who have never even been to Casady, right? Who don't have that connection with you on any level, especially like Mrs. Danaway, who'd be giving brand new families to the environment. And so building community is important. And I think that it pays off in all of your assignments. So when you think about building the community, it might seem like an extra step in the process, but really it's going to help you be able to connect with your students to see whether or not they are connected. And if we're in this, you know, till August, that's going to be 5 months, right, of people being quarantined. And they're going to be frustrated. We're going to have a higher frustration level. I was really positive for 2 weeks, right? Oh, we're going to spend more time together. This is going to be great. And then the longer it goes, the more frustrating it can become and disconnecting for people. So building that community is important. So yeah, one of the big things that people who teach online talk about is having discussions. And in an upper division or even a middle division class, that's pretty easy to talk about, that you could just have a chat board where students are able to respond to your question. The younger the student gets, the more difficult I think that truly becomes, right? That to expect a 5-year-old or a 6-year-old to type their response, I just think isn't going to provide that same community. It's just going to provide frustration for the kid. And we don't want to add that. We don't want to add another layer of frustration for them in our trying to build community. So I do think that tools such as Flipgrid might be a way to do that because, and I know a lot of our I've seen it in lower division. I'm not sure that I've personally seen it in primary. Not to say that people aren't using it in primary, just not my personal experience. Are using Flipgrid, and it's great because it's very easy. It's a huge plus sign, so the student knows exactly what to click on to add their assignment. You know, some interfaces are just harder to figure out. Where do I post? How do I upload? And on Flipgrid, it's huge. It's the first thing that they see. It's very, you know, intuitive for them to click on that. And then they can add a video. And so all of our students can talk, right? And we want them to talk about their learning. So maybe you post a discussion and it could be that you do it through a video as well if you're not wanting them to have to read it, and something for them to think about. Some really easy discussions that can be plugged in anywhere are, what was your biggest takeaway this week? What was your favorite art assignment you did this week? What's your favorite book you read? Tell me about that. Or you could integrate, you know, if you were trying to have a specific skill, like I know in 4th grade, they're talking about adjectives and adverbs right now. So even in a video though, you could ask them to, in their response, make sure that you use at least 3 adjectives when you're talking and using that. So I think that you know, Flipgrid would be a really easy way, even for our younger students, to be able to connect. Then they're also able to see the other students' responses, and so that connects them in with it as well. They can post responses to those videos. So I think that might be a way to do it. I also think that we're going to have to think about things that you do in your classroom to build that community and how you flip that online. For example, Noah, who's in kindergarten, lives for being line leader, right? Like he can tell you how many days till he is the leader. And anyone who's had Noah in their class probably can say that was true for them when he was in his class. I mean, he lives to be the leader. He's a second child, but he is definitely the boss. So, you know, how can we incorporate something like that into your morning meetings, perhaps, right? So right now, a lot of morning meetings are just very teacher-led, And that's very important because it would go very sideways quickly if we let small children be in charge of a morning meeting. But is there a role that we could give to students that would rotate around for them to be able to participate when they have that leadership role? You know, they have ownership of that situation and they want to be there and be excited about that. So is there something, you know, maybe they announce the date. That's very simple, very basic, but if they're the one announcing that, then maybe they can be a part of that. On Wednesday, we heard a suggestion, which I thought was great. I think it was Mrs. Fryer who's doing this. Wes, correct me if I got that wrong, but who after their morning meeting, she is asking 3 students to stay afterwards, and then it's just her and 3 students so they can easily see each other, even if they're on an iPad. So she's put them into smaller groups. And I think that that's another big tip as far as creating community is trying to get small groups together. And when we talk about small groups, I would always suggest 3. 3 is my favorite small group number online. It's great because it's small. It's good because it's odd. And when we have odd groups, if you have to vote or come to a consensus, it's more likely that that's going to happen. So if it's possible for you to get in 3s, I really like 3s for online. Yes, Wes suggests here we could have the student give the weather. Yeah, anything like that where you're involving that student. Now, online, you want to prepare the student if they're going to have to be the person speaking. So I said, oh, you do that right now, Mrs. Gwynn. Great, that's perfect. I think that that's such a great way to involve them and interact with them. But if we were in, oh, sorry, please go ahead.
My line leader does the calendar time and is the line leader and does the weather and does all that stuff. So my morning time, what I've done is I took my calendar from school, brought it home, and we do the calendar time. I tell them we do the line leader just like we always did, which is just basically first name alphabetical. And I have the list so they can see it. I tell them ahead of time who's going to be the line leader next time. And if they're not available, who's going to be the line leader the time after that, because not everybody's showing up. And so we've done that and it's worked well. I tell them ahead of time, okay, you know, Emma, you're going to be my line leader tomorrow. And then that day, okay, Emma, you're going to be my line leader or my calendar person today. So I'm going to unmute your microphone so that you can talk. And so it kind of lets them know everybody else still has to stay muted. The only thing is it backfired about 4 days into it because one child just wasn't going to speak, which is fine. So he wasn't going to say the date or the day or the month or this, you know, any of those things, which was fine. His mom was in the background trying to urge him on, but he was just embarrassed. But and then finally I had one kid show up who would have been my second line leader, but he didn't show up that day. And so we had passed him. So when he came on, I said, oh, okay, Amir, you were supposed to be our calendar person a few days ago, but you weren't available. So when Monday comes, if you're on, then you can be our line leader and then, or calendar leader, or whatever. I just can't get the terminology because it changed. But anyway, so it's been working. It's been working real well because everybody realizes they get to be it. And if they miss, I'll come back and pick them back up. So, but they've enjoyed that because I haven't figured out how I can get them engaged to be able to speak without everybody speaking all at once. And that's what I've been doing. It's been working pretty well. Sorry to interrupt you.
No, I'm so glad you did. And I'm so glad to hear that that's working for you. You know, if you do have a kiddo who's having a hard time talking in the large group, I do think inviting them with maybe some of their buddies into a smaller group afterwards so that they can practice that and see that it is going to be okay to speak and, you know, have that ability to practice that. I also think that maybe if they're not going to communicate, maybe they could write it or something, you know, even if it's not perfect spelling, but that practice writing, right? And then they could just show it. If they would be willing to do that, they might just be able to show a piece of paper.
Jennifer, I've been doing that with my children.
Great.
You know, if the shy ones who don't want to talk, so I just ask them to do it on a paper or something and show it to us. So I've been practicing that. Thank you, though.
Excellent. Good. Yeah, and if anything's working for you all, please share that because I think that the collaboration for what's working is so valuable. Go ahead, Wes.
couple thoughts. Like it's wonderful to see you all, and like we don't normally get together. And yesterday we did a little seesaw choice board, but it wasn't just folks in their same team. Of course, I'm hearing a lot from my wife, right? And she's loving her third grade team, but she's meeting with them a lot. And so I think our students are really missing the interaction with each other and playing off of each other. One of the things with seesaw that's challenging is they don't get to see each other's work like they could before. Not that they sometimes had a lot of opportunity to do that, but I'm reminded, this was back in like the early 2000s, there was a professor at the University of Connecticut. He taught psychology, and he taught big classes. But this is when podcasting was first starting. And so what he would do is he would bring in, and he required them to do this, I think, a smaller group, like maybe 3 or 4 students, and then they would talk about a chapter and basically have a discussion about it, but in a small group. But they would record that and they would share that out with the community. Maybe just kind of like Jennifer was talking about Shelley having a couple kids and they're not recording that. I don't know, that would be a way of having students be together in a smaller group interacting, and then let students be able to hear each other. That could be something that could happen both with younger students as well as older. I definitely agree with Jennifer that, our students are verbally so much more fluent, especially at younger ages, but even when they're middle schoolers, than they are necessarily writing. And so if we could find some ways for them to be able to play off of each other's ideas and have discussions, I really like that idea. So any other thoughts about that? Anybody experimenting with that?
I know Noah in Mrs. Fowler's class, she's letting them have some show and tell of items that they never would have been allowed to bring to show and tell at school, right? So some things that would not be school appropriate or that you'd want every kid to bring. So I do like being able to bring that in.
Carrie, I'm looking at your note in the early RL days. We had a birthday via email. So Danielle Sappington in our 6th grade is doing a similar thing in her advisory when she has, well, actually in her English class as well, on Google Classroom, she's posting a Flipgrid link that she's inviting her kids to go in and add to celebrate their classmates and their fellow advisees for their birthdays. And then she sends that link to that child. So they're able to kind of hold on to that. And kind of keep it as part of it. And then the different kids add in over the course of the day. And it's, it seems like that's been a really nice celebration piece and a community building piece and a way of making a fuss of kids who were excited about, getting to have their birthday on campus, and now they can't. But I mean, that has applications in so many ways that we could leverage, especially if we have to think about how to do this again in the fall, if we have to think it remotely. So.
And one of the things too that I thought about might be theme weeks, right? And I think that we do that a lot in the classroom, where we have, a spirit week, or dress like in is it March when Dr. Seuss's birthday is, and students get to dress up as their favorite book character. Amy's saying, yes, I'm on the right date. Okay. And so, being able to still do some of those celebrations, but have the students do them from home, I think, makes it special and does promote that learning community. Instead of just, sometimes when we move to remote learning, there's a tendency to kind of tunnel vision in and just want to do the assignment. Here's the activity I need you to do, complete the activity, submit it. And still being able to do those celebrations, I think, is such a wonderful way to be able to do that. Does anyone, we're getting kind of close toward, but I wanted to know if anyone had any questions about assignments or activities that they were hoping to be able to do, or types of things they were hoping to do towards the end of the semester that you're having difficulty with. I just want to make sure that I answer any questions that you all have. So please stop me from talking and let me answer your questions. Yeah, Amy.
Excuse me. I was just going to say that I've just been pondering and thinking through different things. And, it's kind of like for me where I am with all kinds of different things where it's like, darn, I wish I could go back and redo that. And finding some things that I wish I would have done differently. But the other thing that I analyzed and kind of came to this morning is that one of the big things I've been thinking about, Jennifer, is the thought about examples and things like that. And I find that one of the things that's been really frustrating for me to work through that when I've had an idea is the inconsistency in some places of what platforms our kids are working on, not even platforms, but devices. That I created a video on my computer and then I went, hold on, this doesn't work, but I don't have the capability to be on all of those devices and create each of those individually. So while in the long run, it's been that I've needed to do some one-on-one with kiddos to help walk them through some of those questions, that to me has kind of been where I've kind of hit a plateau of, well, I had this idea, and so I had to kind of adjust. And so I'm wishing that I knew more about what devices kids were on, because I feel like some of the catches have been device issues, not necessarily my activity issues, but I'm definitely thinking ahead of the next few weeks together of what I might anticipate to do differently. So, and then my other comment was just going to be 3 is my favorite number for small groups too. And when it falls like that, I think it's just kind of, to me, the perfect number for time and space, that especially when you're working for giving individualized attention, there's a big difference between 3 and even 5 and things like that. So anyway, but I found it really interesting that with with all of my groups, I've had notes of what I felt like were the skills and things and lesson pieces that I wanted to touch points on. But the need for them to connect and be able to visit and see one another has far outweighed anything that I had prepared to be able to teach. And so it's been really nice to have that opportunity. And it was fun. We have a student who is out of the country right now. And so the time difference is pretty significant, but we were able to connect via email with her family. And so we did a go-to meeting about 7 o'clock last night, which was the morning time for this student. And one of her best friends was able to get on. So it was really fun to just be able to take the time to do that and make that happen for those kiddos. So definitely the connection is where it's at right now. So it's been good.
After Caleb had his meeting this week with you and Ethan, I told him, I said, listen, you have to let Mrs. Hanneman do whatever she wants to. Like, you were just visiting, like, stop talking to Ethan and let her do her thing. So yes, I do think that they are in desperate need of that connection and wanting that. And, Wes kind of commented on this in the chat here, but I do think that if unfortunately we're in remote learning for the fall, this question of platform is going to be increasingly important. And Wes and I had visited on Monday about this, but that there might be a need to come up with a learning management system that's more Casady based, universal, because if you have a strong learning management system, then it kind of takes away some of that device problems for you, because it embeds everything into one place. And that's just, unfortunately, the frustration you're feeling there is a result of being thrown into it, as opposed to it being a plan.
Sure.
I might think about if you wanted to send out like a Google form to all your students and figure out what's your primary device that you're doing this work on, but then what do you also have available? Like this morning, Caleb was on my Surface Pro trying to do his GoToMeeting, and it just was not working. And so I pulled out my phone and did the app on my phone, which he doesn't love because he can't see everybody, but he was still able to then participate with his teacher, right, and talk to his social studies teacher, and that was more important. So maybe even, finding out what they have and then making them come up with what their backup plan is, because we all do that, right? We panic. I was having a hard time. I had to reinstall an app on mine, to get in here today, and I'm like, oh my, I'm supposed to be there. And so it happens to everyone. And so making them identify what their backup plan is before the tragedy happens, because when you feel like I'm supposed to be there, that meeting is starting, that panic sets in, and they don't always have the best problem solving skills, or maybe that's just my voice, maybe that's unique to me, I don't know, but being able to solve those problems in that situation. So making them think of what is it that they can do as the backup? And for Caleb, that was to get my phone and use the GoToMeeting app on my phone. But he hadn't thought through what his backup was going to be. He had no plan. So I like the idea of maybe having them articulate what that backup plan might be. Yeah, Wes, I like what I shared with you on Monday. I like Canvas and I like Desire to Learn as far as platforms go, LMS platforms.
What advice would you have for us? And this, I mean, we had a really nice conference on Tuesday, Jeremy and I, with Vinny Vrotny and Kincaid. He's their tech director. And then at Oak Ridge, both Michelle Vaughn and Ashley Reed that provide their tech support. They're both using Seesaw, with their younger grades. I mean, we're very much in line with many peer schools. And I would kind of think the learning management system probably is going to be more middle and upper. But Jennifer, do you have thoughts for us on whether that's something we want to pilot? I mean, we've certainly been in survival mode and probably still are a little bit. I mean, we're wrapping up the year, but what advice would you have for us? Is that something we'd want some people to pilot, or would that make things more confusing when it's like, wait a minute, Dr. Fryer's doing this and, Mr. Sappington's doing this, and what do you think?
Yeah, I personally hate the idea of piloting anything new right now. As an educator myself, I'm getting some nods. Okay. I mean, just the idea of going to a new platform, having to have that pickup of, learning it yourself, then having your students learn it, and then troubleshooting all the problems you're going to have. I think you're just going to lose too much educational time to try to do any sort of pilot the end of the semester. Where I might suggest a pilot would be for some Summer by the Lake programs. I don't know what's going to happen for Summer by the Lake this summer, but an LMS would work really well for that. And so, that could be a revenue stream where you're still being able to, have students enroll in that, but it also provides students that connection. Parents are probably even more desiring the Summer by the Lake programs this summer because they've been with their kids already so much. So being able to have those, and that might help provide a better bridge into your August classes with some of those programs. But if I were going to suggest a pilot opportunity, I would do that in the summer. And that's what we do on the university. Anytime we pilot a new anything when it comes to technology, we always do it in a summer term because your number of students is smaller, which means your tech questions are lower.
That's a great suggestion. And we'll find out, but there's been some dialogue about what we might do there. Can you talk a little bit about discussion? We've mentioned Flipgrid, and I've written some notes, so I think we may follow up with a Flipgrid workshop and maybe a book creator workshop. Those things sound good. Are there any discussion tools, or you talked about in one of I think the fourth video, the cafe. So this is can you elaborate a little bit on what that looks like? What might that look like in a lower or a primary division classroom? Is it possible to recapture that kind of, where the teacher doesn't have to answer every question, students can kind of come in and, I mean, is that something more for middle and upper division?
No, I definitely think lower division. I'm having a hard time thinking about it for like Lavender, but I think that most every other division could have it. So what I call a cafe board is my coffee shop talk, right? So you've come in, you have a question, and then your friends, your peers are able to answer those questions. So I tell students they have to go post there before they can email me when an assignment is due, or I can't find a link to this, or this is a problem I'm having, or how many slides were we supposed to include in this assignment? Anything that should have been in the directions, they need to ask a peer before they come and ask me in an email. That helps cut down on just the number of emails that I get, but it also makes them, be that teacher, right, to each other. It provides that connection, that learning community. I monitor it, so I'll go in and check just to make sure someone's not giving bad advice, right? They're not saying you have to have 2 sources in your paper when really the assignment was 4. I don't want bad advice to sit there, but I don't respond, just to every question in there. And even if there's a bad answer, I'll let it sit for just a little bit because I want someone else to check them in the way that they would do that in the conversation naturally with each other. So I will eventually, correct it, but most of the time it's very quickly fixed by someone else, and they'll take a screenshot and you're way wrong, right? Like, this is what this instruction says. And so providing that cafe is an opportunity for them to be able to ask each other. And in Google Classroom, I know the 4th grade is using Google Classroom. It could be in just one of the assignments that happens in Google Classroom, and then they would be able to post to each other and ask questions. I see that they're doing that on some of the assignments, like I don't understand number 2 or something like that. And that's probably not the best use of the assignment discussion board, but that might be something that they could use in more of a cafe situation where they're able to just have some open-ended conversations between each other. But when we get, I think on any grade, but definitely if I'm looking at the room and seeing that there's more, lower division and primary people here today, I think one question that you could ask students is, how would you improve? If you were going to do this assignment again, what would you do differently to improve? To get them to start thinking about their own learning, because they have to be more active learners. They're more responsible for their learning. And especially our primary teachers here are so excellent at that, because you're already doing that in Montessori. That's a natural thing in Montessori, to make them the active, driver in their education. So yeah, reflection, exactly. Being able to ask, what is it that you would do differently? And I ask this question a lot to students, and I shared this on Wednesday, is I will give them an example, whether that's a video, or I'm thinking in Montessori, you could record yourself doing an activity and then ask them, where was the mistake? What happened that went wrong? And have them respond and tell you what went wrong, because they're, or at least my kids, are quick to be like, no, that's not the order that you do that in, or no, the U does not go in that word. That is not a U sound I'm hearing. So them being able to correct is another way to do that I think would work for our lower division and primary students. I also will give them a word bank sometimes and say, these are our 16, in my class, I call them speech terms. In your class, you might call them math terms, or, language arts terms, whatever they are, that you should know and be able to use. And then I will give them a video, maybe a YouTube video, or a previous student doing something, or if you have another child at home, you could record them or record yourself, anything like that, and then ask them to analyze it. And you might choose a different word than analyze, but to evaluate it using those terms. So if they were then having to use those terms in their evaluation, I think that that's a way for them to create that. But having that word bank is valuable for them, because then they know what words they're supposed to use. Mrs. Lopez, you might give them Spanish words specifically that you want them to use in their evaluation of that. But I think that putting them in the teacher role where they're able to correct, or, I'll ask students a lot of times, hey, if someone was absent yesterday, what would you tell them? How would you teach them this lesson? And I know, Mrs. Danaway, you use that where you'll have students come over and say, can you sing that song, or could you show them how to do this? And so that opportunity still for them to be able to do that, even though we're doing remote learning, I think would be a valuable tool for our students.
Something else, I've got a question I'll put in the chat for you there, Jennifer. My favorite thing in 7th grade math was that our teacher let us make up questions, and she would choose different ones to put on the overhead projector that we would solve. And so that was our bell ringer activity or whatever. And I remember, writing questions about rock climbing and the math of the mountain and these kind of things like that. And I wonder, as you're talking about active learning, and I think of co-teaching and asking students to bring ideas, maybe there's some elements there where a student could record a short video to ask their question, and that could be the question of the day. I know a number of our teachers do morning meetings now, and they'll have a question of the day that students will answer. But anyway, I definitely resonated with everything you said about active learning and trying to help shift students in that way to be more active, and to think about how do we give them agency, let them have choices, and then also have their voices shared in the class.
Yeah. Okay, so your question talks about breaking things up visually when we're giving directions. And so I talk about this in one of the videos, and I call it chunking, because anytime you're giving text directions, you want to make sure that you try to chunk it out as much as possible. And by that, I mean adding those headers. And you can do this in any Word document or in any HTML file that you're working with. There's a drop-down menu. So you'll have a paragraph font, a heading font, heading 2 font, all those options, and it changes the thickness and the boldness of your writing there. And I have to follow pretty strict heading choices when I create things, because we have students who are visually impaired and they use readers. And so the reader picks up on those headers. You might be able to just use bold or that sort of thing to be able to distinguish it. But we never, when we talk about it being too long, if a student has to scroll, then it's too much text. So if you think about what they would see on their screen, what the snapshot would look like, if it's a scroll, it's too much. So you want to break that up somehow. And so you can do that through just heading titles by due dates. You can also add visual breaks for the student through pictures. And this is really valuable, especially for students who struggle with reading, right? If Caleb sees just a ton of text, he is automatically overwhelmed and wants to buy out very quickly. But if it's broken up into smaller groups, it has a picture somewhere, even if the picture has nothing to do with the content, he's like, oh, well, I can do this. It has a picture. Like he just mentally has this switch as a result. It also provides an eye break, right? When we have to think about that, how much time our students are now spending on devices is much more than we ideally would want. So having those just visual breaks for the student is good. And when there's so much text, it's just, when it's text heavy, it's hard on the eye. So if you can add pictures, a cartoon, just, even clip art, it doesn't have to be like amazing. It doesn't even have to say like it would add to the content, but it provides that visual break. It helps students. And then we also know that headers, like transitions in a public speech or in a writing assignment, help give the person who's reading it or listening to it an opportunity to come back in. So if their attention span has been spent, then having that heading, having that transition, they go, oh, well, I don't know what was happening, but mentally they can buy back into it. So if you're doing a video, I know that we had talked about videos kind of at the beginning. I think having a strong preview where you set up like the 3 things you're going to talk about, then talk about them with transitions, and then review them in your conclusion is important, because those all are buy back ins for the student. So if they've lost interest, or their brother's running around the room, their dogs come in, there's a Fortnite message for them on their computer, having those transitions just naturally invite a person back to the conversation. So I would use those. Yeah, those are my speech and debate skills. I will never leave being a speech teacher, but so using those in your videos, but then also thinking about that when you're writing, to writing your your directions, and having that in your directions, I think, is important too.
Well, Jennifer, you have shared a wealth of fantastic tips and wisdom and experiences with us, and I want to applaud you for doing such a great job addressing the very diverse audience we have. I mean, today, yes, let's give her a round of applause, because we certainly, I think, had more middle and upper division last time, but you've given us relevant stuff for whatever we're teaching and whatever grade level. And the early stuff we talked about today, I'm most excited about, like, guest speakers, how do we connect with alumni? How do we do things that we're not typically doing, where, primary kids may work with, older students on, writing a book, or, doing some kind of a project. So I hope that conversation will continue. I want to give Sarah a chance to say some concluding words, and then we'll pass it to you, Jennifer. So thoughts as we wrap this one up?
I just want to say thank you. Remember that those videos are online and will continue to be online, the original ones. So if you have colleagues who, say, oh, wait, where was that? And what was that again? You can direct them there. And then, Jennifer has also volunteered that if there are smaller groups who are wrestling with a particular project, either an existing one that they want to tweak or figure out how to adapt, or to develop a new one, that she can be available for a time to do have that conversation as well. So know that that's a resource. And thank you. It was nice to see all the faces.
And you did have one more question, Ms. Chowdhury. End of year closure. Any closing tips there, as well as your sort of wrap up thoughts?
Great. So end of the year closure, I think that I would try to do the things that you do before and figure out the way to do that online. And so I think that probably will be very video heavy, honestly, and providing that, that your students are going to be able to see your face. And then one of the things that I've suggested for end of the year closure is an e-portfolio. And I know that probably sounds a little overwhelming for our younger kids, but it's not. We can do this with our younger kids too. Because what I think that you should do is identify hey, these are the top 5 things that you should have taken away this year, right? Or this semester or during your remote learning. These 5 things, so objectives, student outcomes, whatever that might be. And then have students prove to you, justify how they've met those. Maybe show an assignment that they've already completed. Mrs. Hanneman, if a student had really had an improve in their reading, numbers, like their reading score, their cold score or something, that might be a way for them to prove that to you. But allow them to show those artifacts that they've already done this semester, their favorite things, maybe take it from that perspective of favorite things that they've done in remote learning, and let them put that together, maybe through Google Slides or through a Seesaw blog. And Wes might have some better answers. I'm not as familiar with the tech side of Seesaw about the options there, but I do think that there would be some where the students could then, attach and connect some of maybe their 5 favorite things that they've done in remote learning. And that drives them to be the active person almost proving that they've learned things during this time. So Seesaw blogs as a portfolio, I think, would be a way to do that and incorporate that. But I do think you're going to have a lot of videos at the end of the year, kind of wrapping up some of those things that you would normally be saying with the students in the classroom. And Seesaw does allow you to do that, but it also might need to be, in GoToMeetings and having some of those smaller meetings with the students that way. But as my concluding sentence, I would say that you all are doing an amazing job, and I am very, very proud of you. And it's no surprise to me the hard work and dedication you're putting into your classes and for your students. I am here for you as a resource. I care about you all individually so much, especially I can say that really truthfully today. All of you all are my people, and I just you mean so much to me and what you've poured into my kids. If there's anything that I can then turn around and help you with in this time, I would just love to do that. So reach out to me or Sarah or Wes, and they can get you connected with me. But if there's anything that I can do to help, or, as you're thinking about, like Mrs. Danaway, if you're thinking about the Lavender kids, how do we just get together, and you want to get together with your 4 people there in Lavender with me, then we could talk specifically about that, or whatever that might be. I'd be happy to discuss that through. So thank you guys so much for